This is the original fretboard that I cut out. I've just given it a coat of paint. Just want to see how all this works. The pearl dot is under there. It's actually a little bit lower than what I would have liked, so I'll probably mill that one out and put a clean set of dots right down this board. But I wasn't really happy with the milling process that I'd programmed, so I thought I'd have a go at doing another one. So I've just used a piece of Tassie oak just from the local hardware store. It's a kiln dried wood, and this was the first one I did, this back one here, and it just had a little blemish in it. I thought it might be a usable one, being it's a Tassie oak, and I thought it might be fine for a fretboard, but I didn't like this blemish. I'm sure I could fill it. But what I've done here is I've surfaced the material to 0.6 millimeters above where it should be, and then I've drilled the holes for the dots down to the correct height. So my plan is to glue the dots in and then do a finished surface, so I can just bolt it back down onto the table using these holes. But like I said, I wasn't happy with this one because of that little bit there, so I thought I'd have another go, and everything was starting to look good until one of these guys appeared right in the middle. So it wasn't on that side and it wasn't on the top, it just appeared, so that's annoying. And again, I'm sure I can just fill them, but I'm hoping to have a nice clean one. And I changed the process a bit, so this one here, it just jumped in on the edges here. This is probably the height that it needs to be. This is down at fretboard height, but I didn't like those, just in case they're a smidgen too low. So I took them out on this process. On this one, you don't see them here at all. And then the final cut would just be a parallel finish up and down the fretboard. Just taking off that 0.6 millimeters and trimming off the surface of the dots there, just to make it a nice, clean, even finish. So no sanding. Well, just a very light hand sand is required. I decided I didn't need the timber guides down the side here because there's really no effort in sanding. I'm just taking off the surface. So yeah, I don't really need any guides. I took them off. But right now I'm milling my final fretboard into rosewood, using the technique that I used to mill this one. So hopefully there'll be none of these appearing in the middle. And then I'll stop when I get to this point, and I'll probably stick a couple of dots in one of these and just test the finish to see if it mills up nicely, because I don't have that many. I've got enough to do one fretboard. I've ordered some more, but I've got enough to do one fretboard and some spares. So I'll either finish this one and make this one or this one. I don't know yet. Don't know what I'm going to do. But I seem to have a small supply of fretboards with one more on the mill as we speak. So this is hopefully going to be my final fretboard that I'll use on my guitar. It's a rosewood. So we're just going to essentially cut away, do what's called a rough cut, which is just clearing the majority of it. Then I'll put in a smaller bit and I'll mill down to 0.6 millimeters above the surface, and do the edges to make it all nice and tidy. Then I'll mill the dots, and then I'll stop until I test the dot procedure. So we'll see how we go. Here's a rundown of where I'm up to. So my neighbour threw out a coffee table, which I grabbed, and I've made some samples out of it. This was my first attempt at a neck, just to see what it would look like. My first volute, the first end here, just to test things out, and I discovered that the holes in my machine, in my table, weren't aligned, so I was milling out of alignment here. So that was the first issue I had to solve, which was pretty easy, just mill some new holes in the table. So second attempt went much better. Again, just in the test wood, everything seemed to go well, but I was not 100% happy with just the shape up here. After I'd put the machine heads in, I thought they weren't quite sitting right. They were too close together on the back here. I changed the volute a bit to make it a different shape there. It's sort of a longer one, which looked a little better, but still wasn't quite right. But the back end here was a bit of a disaster, so I had another go at that one. My next attempt was this one, just made out of some hardwood that I picked up from the wreckers. So again, lengthened the volute. Made these a little bit wider, but they're only a little bit too wide this time. So when you put your machine heads in, these two are in alignment, but this one was out a little bit too wide. So just visually, I didn't like the look of that. So I moved it, just made a few adjustments on it. So it's wider than this, but a bit tighter than that. And I adjusted the back here. So I think I got that a much nicer shape, which is closer, I would think, to the Red Special. But I wasn't again happy with the shape of the truss rod cavity here. For the purist, sorry, yes, I'm using just a standard truss rod. It fits in there nicely. It's quite a tight squeeze, but it is a bit sloppy at the back here. And it doesn't. It's got a square bottom, and this truss rod it's a curved at the bottom. So I thought I'll make a new truss rod cavity that is curved at the bottom. So I've had another go at the truss rod cavity, and I've done that, which I'll show you in a sec. These are just some of the samples that I cut when I was making my jig over here. I made a couple of jigs. So this is the actual body that I'm going to use. It's Tassie oak hardwood. I think it's about 40 mil in total there. So once I put the mahogany veneer on top, it'll be just over 40, I guess, with the glue and so forth. This is just a sample piece of hardwood. This wood here is the same as what I made this one out of. So I'll probably do one more test neck just to check the final design before going into my piece of wood that I purchased from Australian Guitar Timbers up in Queensland. So that's a piece of rosewood. Initially it was a bit too thick, so they sliced off the top and sent it down to me because I don't have a tool to slice through a bit of wood like that. So I made my first fretboard test out of that. Oh yeah, that's the outside shape. So if I grab this one, this is what this came out of. So that came out of there. So this one here is it's a curved bottom truss rod cavity. And I'll just get the truss rod out of here. It's a bit tight at this end, I can't get it out. So the truss rod fits in there absolutely perfectly with no play, no wobble, no movement. So I'll use that tool path on this piece of wood here when I cut my final neck. As I said, I'll probably do one more test neck. I expect this little bit of knot here will go straight through the neck somewhere, but that's fine, it's just a test neck. So it'll look something like this, but the final shape that I want, again, I'll test my machine heads to see if everything's looking all lined up as it should. But yeah, the next test neck should be very nice. This is probably usable, but I'm not 100% happy with it. Now the fretboards I've been doing. So this bit of wood was the top of my neck bit of wood, which he sliced off. I've tried a few things here. So I have milled a fretboard, put all the slots in it for the frets, and drilled the holes for the pearl dots, and I actually put a pearl dot in here and then milled the surface of it. But I actually milled it too deep, which is kind of strange. I guess if I was to do that technique and to mill the dots, I'd mill too high and slowly lower it down. I've given it a couple of coats of paint, which is not what I'm going to do. Then I had another go. I just thought I'd try in some Tassie oak, just some store hardware bought hardwood. So I milled this one. I stopped short of the surface. So this is actually milled down to 0.6 short of the height. So I've got to go another 0.6 down. I've milled the holes in. I thought I could put the fret dots in, glue them in, push them down to the bottom, glue them in, and then do the final cut with the CNC machine. So that actually mills the surface of the dots, and so everything's nice and finished. So it would require I guess just a clean-up sand really, so no sanding of dots there. But it had a bit of a flaw in it, in the wood there, which was to be expected. So I thought I'd have another go, and I found this piece of Tassie oak, nice piece, and the same thing happened, had a flaw in it. But I think this process is going to work. So I've milled my final one out of, again, a piece of rosewood that I purchased from Australian Guitar Timbers in Queensland. It's a beautiful wood. So I've milled down to 0.6 above the surface there. I'll do the dots next, and then I'll do a finish cut. But I want to glue some dots in, probably, I don't know, one of these boards, and then just do the finish cut just to test to see how it finishes up, and then I'll do it in my finished fretboard that I'm going to actually use. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. This whole exercise was to one, make a nice guitar and improve my CNC skills, which I think I'm doing, because I've not milled wood before. I've got a CNC machine and I'd hardly mill wood at all, would you believe? I usually make other things. And it's also a plasma cutter, so it's a multi-purpose machine that I made about 7 or 8 years ago. The table goes up and down, and I've got a rotary axis for it and a few other things. So yeah, anyway, so that's where I'm at. I'm absolutely having a ball. Who would have thought making a guitar would be so much fun?